So Trump Care 3.0 is dead. Republicans decided yesterday they're not even going to vote on it. They knew they didn't have the votes. There was no point in actually holding the vote that they seemed desperate to have before September 30th, after which they would need 60 votes in order to pass it rather than just the 51 votes that they were initially seeking. And at this point, we have to be asking the question, why do they keep trying to repeal Obamacare, right? I mean, we have another failure to repeal Obamacare, the third major failure during Trump's administration, the 8 months that he's been in office so far. And any normal person would be asking the question at this point, well, why not just stop trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act? The simple answer we've been hearing is campaign promise, right? Making Obamacare better, which seems to be the most logical thing right now. We have a system that's in place. It's the for-profit employer-connected healthcare system. There's really no chance of something like Medicare for all passing, something that Bernie Sanders has proposed under the Republican-controlled House, Senate, and White House. So what if we said right now the best move is improve the aspects of Obamacare that are not functioning that well? And one reason is there's been a promise from many Republicans for years, as well as many of the Republicans that ran for 2016, and from Donald Trump to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. So that's like the simple layer one explanation, but there's a lot more to it. It's not just voters who have heard the promise and want to see the people they voted for, I guess, check off a list of putting some successes up on the board. But it's donors. Republican donors really want the Affordable Care Act repealed. And an anonymous Republican senator told Politico that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, might be returning to health care yet again and even more in what's left of 2017 to show donors that the Republicans in the Senate are trying. Because then, I guess, for re-election purposes, they could say, hey, we've been trying. Senate Republicans were actually warned at a private meeting that fundraising was not going particularly well for them, in part because donors are disappointed that they don't really have accomplishments under Trump to tout and to brag about. That's according to the New York Times. And then the Washington Post has reported that senators have been faced with, quote, an unrelenting barrage of confrontations with some of their closest supporters, donors, and friends over the multiple failures to repeal the Affordable Care Act. This changes votes, right? The impact of money and donors. Let me talk about one example. Dean Heller, right? Dean Heller is a moderate Republican from Nevada. Las Vegas is in Nevada. Big Republican donors, Sheldon Adelson and Steve Wynn, are in Nevada. And Dean Heller, oddly enough, switched from being against repealing the Affordable Care Act to being in favor not only of a repeal, but specifically in favor of the Graham-Cassidy bill, which is now dead in the water. Reportedly, after Sheldon Adelson and Steve Wynn, constituents and major donors of Dean Heller's, got on the phone with the guy and were not particularly friendly, right? I think we can read between the lines, but they stated they're not pleased with what's going on and Dean Heller better get in line and try to get this thing repealed. Steve Schmidt, you might remember, he ran Senator John McCain's presidential campaign back in 2008. Pretty astute political analyst and strategist, a Republican one at that. He said to Vox that he's concerned that donors, the priorities of big Republican donors, are what is dictating legislative priorities. And a lot of the priorities seem to be unpassable legislation, like a repeal of Obamacare. So this is really pretty bad, and it tells us a lot about why we see these efforts.
And we always hear about the exceptions, but I mean, the rule is that most of these Republicans will just support the bill no matter what, even if it has a 17% approval rating. And I think Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa said it best. He said that he could give you 10 reasons why he shouldn't support the Graham-Cassidy bill, yet he was going to support it anyway. And I think it has to do with promises to voters, but also promises to donors as well.
And you might say, well, hold on a second, David. Democrats and Republicans, they're different on some issues, they're similar on other issues, but everybody receives donations from health insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. Republicans and Democrats both do that, so why is it that the donors are dictating GOP legislative priorities? Because I'm not talking about the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies. I'm talking about rich individual Republicans who want Obamacare repealed, either for personal reasons, right? Someone who owns big casinos like Steve Wynn and will own them in other states as well, including the one that's coming up here in Massachusetts. It could be just about his own pockets and checkbook. It's not about health insurance companies or big pharma. And it also just seems to be what some Republicans want. They wanted this repealed They're donating big bucks and they expect it to be done, period. And clearly there are Republicans who get it. They get that these bills are fundamentally flawed. And it's possible, and in fact, I've mentioned this before, we are still sort of talking about Obamacare like we have our healthcare system and this thing stuck onto it that is called Obamacare that we could remove at any time. But I think more realistic is that it's been 7 years now, right? We have to be thinking about Obamacare just as part of the healthcare system. And if we're going to make changes, it can't just be get rid of this thing that we think of as an appendage, because it's not an appendage anymore, right? If you're 33 years old or younger, you have been out of your parents' healthcare system only under Obamacare. That's a lot of people. Everybody on the planet who's 33 or younger has had health insurance during a time when they can be either under their parents' plan or they are out, meaning 26 or older, with Obamacare as the status quo. That's going to make it really tough to get rid of this thing.
And we absolutely should be debating healthcare, but you have to remember that money in politics, and I guess you can throw gerrymandering in there as well, are the issues that eclipse all other issues, and that's why I think we really have to get to those first.
Yeah, and those impact every single issue. And from a sort of like practical point of view, in order to do what it is that some Republicans and Trump, I guess, want to do, you need to appeal to both Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, one type of Republican, and Rand Paul, Republican senator from Kentucky. As far as Republicans go, it's hard to get Republicans more ideologically different than Susan Collins and Rand Paul. I don't know how you put together a bill that will appeal to both of them.
And then you have the mavericks who sometimes stand on principle, like Senator John McCain.
Yeah, and he seems to this time have come around. We didn't know. Big deal being made out of how John McCain would ultimately vote. Ultimately, it ended up not even coming to a vote. And yet again, when we go back to it, we go, okay, repeal Obamacare, donors, money in politics, right? We're back to money in politics once again. The video you just finished watching was made possible by you through the membership program. You can sign up for membership at davidpakman.com/membership. We are viewer-supported independent media. You can use the coupon code IVOTED17 for a 40% discount off of your membership.